Have you ever stopped to think if there's a line money just shouldn't cross? Over the last few decades, it kind of feels like markets have crept into every corner of our lives, maybe even becoming disconnected from our values. So today, we're going to dig into the moral limits of markets, inspired by the work of philosopher Michael Sandel. Let's really unpack this tension between market logic and moral value. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at some pretty weird places markets have popped up. Then we'll move past the simple idea that greed is the only problem. We're going to explore a really crucial difference between having a market economy and being a market society, see how market thinking can actually change our values, and then wrap up by asking the big one: what shouldn't be for sale? So to get our heads spinning a little, let's just dive right in with a few real-world ideas that seriously push the boundaries of what we think should be bought and sold. Okay, so this was a real program in Dallas, Texas. The economic logic seems pretty straightforward, right? If you want kids to read more, just offer them cash. People respond to incentives. But here's where it gets tricky. Does paying a kid to read actually change the act of reading itself? Does it turn something that could be a joy into just another chore? We're going to circle back to that thought. Believe it or not, a Nobel Prize-winning economist actually suggested this. His argument was, hey, selling citizenship could attract ambitious people and slice right through all the messy political debates. From a pure market view, it's efficient. But it makes you think, doesn't it? Does citizenship have a meaning that goes beyond a price tag? A sense of belonging, a shared identity. Now, this one is fascinating. The proposal was for an international market. So a country like Japan could, say, pay a country like Uganda to take its share of refugees. The logic? Japan meets its international duty, Uganda gets much-needed income, and more refugees find a safe place. But does a system like that risk turning people in crisis into, burdens to be offloaded, or just another revenue stream? After the 2008 financial crisis, it was super easy to just point fingers. But if we really want to understand the role of markets, we've got to look deeper than just one simple human vice. Yeah, the easy explanation, the one everyone jumped on, was that irresponsible, greedy bankers took way too many risks. And the solution? Just, tell people to be better, be more responsible. But that diagnosis is maybe a little too simple, maybe a little too convenient. So, Sandel suggests we look at this in a completely different way. Instead of just focusing on the personal vice of greed, what if the real problem is the expansion of market thinking into parts of our lives where it just doesn't belong? The issue isn't just the players in the game, it's the game itself getting way too big. And this quote from Adam Smith really gets to the heart of it. Markets have always run on self-interest. The whole point of a market is to channel that self-interest in a way that helps everyone. So just blaming greed kind of misses the bigger, more fundamental question, which is, how far should the market's reach actually go? Okay, so this brings us to a really crucial distinction. It's a subtle shift, but it has had a massive impact over the last few decades. Here's the key idea. Having a market economy, that's a good thing. It's an incredible tool for creating wealth and innovation. But being a market society, that's totally different. That's a place where pretty much everything is for sale, where market thinking starts to control our whole lives, from family and health to our civic duties. And you can see this expansion everywhere. War has been outsourced to private companies. In places like the US and the UK, there are now more private security guards than there are public police officers. Schools, hospitals, even prisons are being run for profit. This isn't just about economics anymore. This is a huge shift in our social fabric. So what happens when we start putting price tags on things that used to be governed by other values? Sandel argues there are two big problems with this. The first is about fairness, but the second, and the one we're going to zoom in on, is a bit more subtle. It's the idea that markets aren't neutral. They can actually change and maybe even corrupt the very goods they touch. And the key idea here is a concept called crowding out. It sounds a bit academic, but it's actually pretty simple. It means that sometimes when you offer money for something, you don't just add an incentive, you actually replace a moral or civic one. You erode that sense of duty or generosity or even just plain old feel. A perfect real-world example of this comes from a study of daycare centers in Israel. They had a really common problem. Parents were showing up late to pick up their kids, which meant teachers had to stay late too. So they tried a classic market solution. They introduced a fine for parents who were late. You'd think that hitting parents in their wallet would make them show up on time, right? But what do you think actually happened? The number of parents showing up late went up, not down. It actually got worse. Now, for standard economic thinking, this is a real puzzle. Why would a penalty lead to more of the behavior it's supposed to stop? And this is a perfect illustration of crowding out. See, before the fine, parents who were late felt guilty about making the teacher wait. That was a moral norm. But the fine replaced that guilt. It turned the fine into a fee. Suddenly, they weren't doing something wrong anymore. They were just paying for an extra service. The market norm crowded out the moral norm. And it's not just daycares. A famous study found a similar thing with blood donation. It showed that systems that relied on paid donors often had more shortages and lower quality blood than systems that relied purely on volunteers. Putting a price on giving blood crowded out that sense of civic duty, of altruism. The money didn't just add to the system, it corrupted the very spirit that made it work in the first place. So what this all boils down to is that deciding where markets belong isn't some technical question just for economists. It's a moral and a political question that involves all of us as citizens. This drift, as Sandel calls it, happened without us really talking about it. We never held a big vote to become a market society. It just sort of happened as market logic seeped into more and more parts of our lives. So the answer isn't just to blame greed or write a few new rules. It's to have a real, robust, democratic conversation. We need to ask, case by case, what's the right way to value certain things? What's the moral meaning of education or health or citizenship? Does putting a price tag on it cheapen it? And that, right there, is the question this whole explainer leaves us with. This isn't about getting rid of markets. It's about putting them back in their proper place. So, what do you think? Where should we draw the line? What are the things that, once you buy and sell them, are just not the same anymore? Does a book read for $2 hold the same meaning as one you read just for the love of it? That's a conversation really worth having.